you want to break, raise your hand. Okay. What we have been doing till now is trying to trace the path which culminated yesterday by introducing the central character in our narrative. I wanted to impress upon everyone that the printer case, which is usually told as a starting point of our story, didn't happen in a day. A person standing up and saying, because my printer is not working, I want to do something, has a long story behind it. Though I wanted to go in little more detail, because of time constraint, I have told only certain important aspects in the story. I'll continue the story from there, and afterwards I'll come back to discuss about the contributions of Richard Stallman and other things. Once the GNU project was announced, that is where we stopped yesterday. The GNU project was announced officially in 1983-84 with the intention of building a complete operating system based on certain principles which RMS, Richard Stallman himself says that it's okay to call him RMS, but that does not mean that you make it a general rule. For example, I don't like people to call him PMK, I hate it, but he is okay with calling him as RMS. So let us use it. The intention of this project GNU was to build a complete operating system based on the principles which he called as free software. I am not discussing free software now, I will come back to it later because I will continue my story. It is not that GNU project did not get popular response as it is made out today. GNU project did get a lot of popular response, and moreover, the leader of this movement, see, I am using deliberately the term movement. This is not simply a project, this is a movement, a social movement. RMS himself being probably the greatest programmer of this generation, current generation including, it had a very strong technical leadership. Lessig Lawrence says, every generation needs a philosopher. Philosopher in the sense someone who can tell where we are, where we should go and how we should go there. Every generation needs such a philosopher. Lessig says, RMS is the philosopher of our generation. He has successfully dealt with this problem which most of the leaders have. Some leaders are very good in attracting people, but they themselves will not work. Some people will work, but will never be able to attract others. Rarely will there be people who will do these both things. Well, I can quote, it was from Bhatrahari's Niti Shataka, I will not with it. Somewhat similarly says the same. Well, so RMS had this capacity of combining his technical expertise with his very clear-cut philosophical idea on where and how we should take this movement forward. Because of which this movement did get very good popular support. But you should understand the dynamics of the time in which all this happened. This was happening in 1980s. If you see the history of computing in 1980s, you will see Sun being formed in early part of 80s. Sun was formed. Why was Sun formed? Sun was formed because some people understood that Unix had a market. Now, Unix story we discussed yesterday. How did Unix come and all that? Because someone thought that there is a market value for Unix, Sun came out. And then there was this company Microsoft which came into contact with IBM, and IBM underestimating Microsoft, allowing it to license its operating system and sell. The dynamics were changing. And there was this visionary Steve Jobs and his technical friend Wozniak, who were coming with some legendary visions. Attractive, sophisticated, aesthetically pleasing and all that. This environment was being created. Till then there was no such industry. There was no mass computer industry, and moreover there was no industry for software. Where was software industry? There was no software industry. Software was still in its very infancy stage, even as an academic discipline. We should not forget that we are saying the story of students, hackers and others. Don't ever think that nothing was happening on the official front. We should not forget when the hacker utopia was there in MIT, some brilliant people came together in 1968. NATO conference, and then introduced the term called as software engineering. These are also happening. We should not forget it. So people on one hand were trying to give some distinct name to this whole program building and creating software. On the other hand, the industry was being built. So there was clash of values. One hand people were minting money, one hand academics were defining a new area. 1968 conference, you have to read the proceedings once in your lifetime, because you will be working as software engineers in your entire life, hopefully. You should read that conference, because in that conference people actually put their minds and heart together to discuss about how software engineering should be. That conference proceeding is written in a very, very neat manner. Who said what kind of thing? You can actually hear the conversation if you read that conference proceedings. Dijkstra, one of the persons who had a cult following then and even today, E.W. Dijkstra. Have you spoken about Dijkstra? No. He is a very great man. He did many things. One thing I particularly like is, he was from Netherlands, E.W. Dijkstra. That guy was so passionate about programming and other things. He was basically a physicist. I keep telling this story. When he wanted to marry, in Netherlands there was this rule that they have to publicly register their marriage. He went very happily to the marriage bureau and he wanted to register his marriage. In the occupation column, he wrote software engineer. And his application was rejected. Because at that time it was not an identified profession. Now if you say software engineer, market well will go very good. That's why we are so, but then E.W. Dijkstra had to face this problem. His marriage was not registered. Then since he had a degree in physics, he rewrote it as theoretical physicist and then it was accepted. So he has faced the problem from then. Very great man. Dijkstra, while speaking in the 1968 conference of software engineering, they were discussing what are the subjects people should study in order to become a software engineer. They were discussing 1968. What do you think they would have finalized on the subjects? This subject you should study to become software engineer. You have studied so many years. What do you think are the most basic subjects?
Microprocessors.
Huh?
Microprocessors.
Okay. Maths. Okay.
Physics.
Physics. Okay.
Chemistry.
Chemistry. Okay. What subject most? This subject, if you study, this subject is a must to become software engineer. Is there any such subject? You are not telling anyone of the subject which I taught. I've been with you for all the most important subject.
Automata.
Okay. And here no other patterns. Data structure, they all can be.
No, not at that time.
Java. C#. Cutting edge technology. What the most, this subject is the must for software engineers. And tomorrow in 2-3 years you will all become team leaders.
Combinatorics. Combinatorics.
Huh? Okay. Dijkstra was a man of ideas there. In fact, in 16th conference itself, I think Perlis told that in 10 years from now, we will have Dijkstra School of Architecture. He had predicted. That didn't happen anyway. Dijkstra said that there are two subjects which he feels is mandatory for anyone who becomes software engineer. 1968. One was management science. Another was operations research. Why I am telling this particularly because when I introduced operations research in the final semester, there was wide criticism against me. People were talking all lot of nonsense. I hope you are also cursing the syllabus maker. Indirectly, it all come to me only. Why operations research? That too in 8th semester. That was because I read and I am a big fan of Dijkstra, so I gave a thought that yeah, correct. Operations research is something which will give, in fact, if I had my way, I would have had operations research, engineering economics and something as the core areas to get here. Management science, of course. Management science not in the way of time-varying MBA kind of management. It's different management which I try to introduce through various subjects like whatever I tried. So Dijkstra had predicted all things. Anyway. So what I was trying to say is there was parallel attempts being done by then people then and those great people. We should not forget them. So we should not see only these stories. This story has a very wide canvas. But anyway, coming back to our narrative, this was what was happening in 80s. Companies were coming up, computers were being sold, software were being sold. At this time, GNU came up, inviting everyone to join and do something. In a sense, GNU came out with a sense of loss. If you recall, yesterday I was telling this. RMS at a particular point of time, he says he was literally crying, sitting alone in the MIT lab, seeing that there is no one around. A place where before a few years, you had people coding and doing so many new things. They gave so much to the industry and today there is no one. Why there is no one? Either all of them have left, started their own company, or they have started working for someone else. That was the situation there and he was a lone man with a sense of loss. He started. Then came a turning point. Turning point happened very unexpectedly. 1991 Linus Torvalds, you know that story. I am not telling the story. What I am saying is, Linus Torvalds, people do ask today, what would have happened if Linus Torvalds would not have come then in 1990? What would have happened? The GNU project would have been completed, I am very sure. Because if the system gave you all the other essential components and only one component missing, it would have come. It is not that without Linus Torvalds this whole story would be incomplete. I am not against Linus Torvalds, please understand. I am not making any harsh comment against him. Who am I to do it? He is a great guy. But this way of storytelling is not correct. You should not say that it was Linus Torvalds who came and saved the whole movement. No, it's not. Accidentally it so happened that there was this guy called as Linus Torvalds, you know that story. But actually there is one more person who becomes important in the story with Linus Torvalds, Tenenbaum. That people usually forget. Without Tenenbaum, you can't discuss Linus Torvalds' story. Because this Tenenbaum guy, he was a professor. He had actually done a small Unix coding to teach in his class, for his classroom teaching, which Linus Torvalds got his hands on and started doing things. So it's not that Linus Torvalds from nowhere started doing things. He had a copy of Unix coding which was done by Tenenbaum, which he started coding in his 386 machine. So that's how the whole story goes. Now, how these two people came together was because when he invited, I am not telling the mainstream story, I hope all of you know. fearing the repetition, I am not saying the whole story. Mainstream story all of you. I am saying the side stories. How these two people became connected was because of GPL. He released his program, the initial write-up which he wrote, the basic skeleton code with GPL, and that is why this GNU project and the supposed kernel which he was trying to write then, which he tentatively later named as Linux, became one entity. And afterwards it so happened that now people thought in the GNU movement that we have all the essential system, what you are missing is kernel. This lab has developed and there was tremendous response to it also. Let us bring these two together, now the whole system is complete. So the whole system, we are not tired of repeating 100,000 whatever times, that is not Linux itself. This is one thing everybody will say, even I will say, you should say this, that if you are simply calling the system what you are calling as Linux, you are actually not doing justice to the entire system. Linux, now you should know, is simply a kernel, and kernel does not make the entire operating system. You need many things for an operating system, and apart from the kernel, everything else is a part of GNU. So, fittingly, all of us should insist that you should call the system as GNU Linux. If you do that, I think this course is successful. If you don't do that, even if you take S-grade, it's okay. You won't get S-grade.
So, what was the story of the GNU herd?
I don't want to say that. I mean, it's okay. That's discontinued, so it's okay. Alexa and I don't want to say that. I mean, that people will feel always there will be girl coming into the story and spoiling the things.
This just says.
No, it's okay.
Switch off the cam, sir.
No. Alexa and all of them know that story.
Those are nobody knows.
I mean, let me tell you, the camera is off.
Cam off.